Hello and welcome to Classical Literature, the show that promises not to steal all of your knowledge and then bury you under a rock. So the last time we checked in with King Arthur and his court, Merlin had been tricked into giving up all of his knowledge to Vivian, an enchantress sent by Queen Morgana Le Fay to seek revenge against King Arthur. This time, we will see how King Arthur fares without Merlin there to protect him. Chapter 3rd. How Queen Morgana Le Fay returned to Camelot and to the court with intent to do ill to King Arthur. Also how King Arthur and others went a-hunting, and of what befell thereby. Now after Merlin had quitted the court with Vivian in that manner aforetold, Queen Morgana Le Fay returned again to Camelot. There she came unto King Arthur and kneeled before him, bowing her face with an appearance of great humility. And she said, Brother, I have meditated much upon these matters that have passed, and I perceive that I have done very ill to talk against thee as I have done, and to be so rebellious against thy royalty. Wherefore I crave of thee to forgive me my evil words and thoughts against thee. Then King Arthur was very much moved, and he came to Queen Morgana, and took her by the hand, and lifted her up upon her feet, and kissed her brow and her eyes, saying, My sister, I have no ill will against thee, but nothing but love for thee in my heart. And so Queen Morgana Le Fay abode at the court in the same manner as she had aforetime done, for King Arthur believed that they were reconciled. Now one day Queen Morgana and the king fell into a friendly talk concerning Excalibur, and Queen Morgana Le Fay expressed a very great desire to see that noble weapon more closely than she had yet done, and King Arthur said he would sometime show it to her. So the next day he said, Sister, come with me, and I will show thee Excalibur. Therewith he took Queen Morgana by the hand, and led her into another apartment, where was a strong wooden coffer bound with bands of iron. Then the king opened the coffer, and therein Queen Morgana Le Fay beheld Excalibur, where he lay in his sheath. Then King Arthur said to her, Lady, take this sword and examine it as you please. Therewith Queen Morgana took Excalibur into her hands, and lifted him out of the coffer. And she drew the sword out of the sheath, and lo, the blade flashed like lightning. Then she said, Sir, this is a very beautiful sword, and I would that my Sir, this is a very beautiful sword, and I would that I might take it hence and keep it for a little, so that I might enjoy it in full measure. Now King Arthur was of a mind to show the queen great courtesy at this time of their reconciliation, wherefore he said to her, Take it, and be thou its keeper for as long as thou wilt. So Queen Morgana took Excalibur and his sheath, and bare them away with her to her inn, and she hid the sword in the bed where she slept. Then Queen Morgana sent for sundry goldsmiths, 8 in number, and for certain armor-smiths, 8 in number, and for certain cunning jewelers, 8 in number, and she said unto them, Make me a sword in every particular like this sword that I have here. And thereupon she showed them Excalibur in his sheath. So these goldsmiths and armor-smiths and lapidaries labored with great diligence, and in a fortnight they had made a sword so exactly like Excalibur that no eye could have told the difference betwixt the one and the other. And Queen Morgana Le Fay kept both swords by her until her purposes should have been fulfilled. It befell upon a certain day that King Arthur proclaimed a hunt, and he and all of his court were party thereunto. Now the day before this hunt took place, Queen Morgana Le Fay came to King Arthur and said, Brother, I have here for thee a very beautiful and noble horse, which I intend to gift thee as a gift of love. Therewith she called aloud, and there came 2 grooms, bringing a horse as black as jet, and all beset with trappings and harness of silver. And the horse was of such extraordinary beauty that neither King Arthur nor anybody who was with him had ever before seen its like for beauty. So a wonderful delight possessed the king at the sight of the horse, and he said, Sister, this is the noblest gift I have ever had given to me for this long time. Ha, brother, quoth Queen Morgana, Doth that horse then belike thee? Yea, said King Arthur, it belikes me more than any horse that I ever beheld before. Then, quoth Queen Morgana, consider it a gift of reconciliation betwixt thee and me, and in sign of that reconciliation I beg of thee that thou wilt ride that horse forth upon the hunt tomorrow day. And King Arthur said, I will do so. So the next day he rode forth to the hunt upon that horse, as he said that he would do. Now it happened some time after noon that the hounds started a hart of extraordinary size, and the king and all of his court followed the chase with great eagerness. But the horse of King Arthur soon outstripped all the other horses, saving only that of a certain very honorable and worthy knight of the court, hight Sir Accolon of Gaul. So Sir Accolon and the king rode at a great pace through the forest, and they were so eager with the chase that they wist not whither they were riding. And at last they overtook the hart, and found that it was embushed in a certain very thick and tangled part of the forest, and there King Arthur slew the stag, and so the chase was ended. Now after this had come to pass, the king and Sir Accolon would have retraced their way whither they had come, but in a little they perceived that they were lost in the mazes of the woodland, and wist not where they were. For they had followed the chase so far that they were in an altogether strange country. So they wandered hither and thither, at great length until eventide, at which time they were oppressed with hunger and weariness. Then King Arthur said to Sir Accolon, Messire, meseems we shall have nowhere to rest ourselves tonight, unless it be beneath a tree in this forest. To this Sir Accolon made reply, Lord, if thou wilt follow my counsel, thou wilt let our horses seek their own way through this wilderness, so, haply, because of the instinct of such creatures, they shall bring us unto some place of habitation. Now this advice appeared to be very good to King Arthur, wherefore he did as Sir Accolon advised, and let loose his bridle rein, and allowed his horse to travel as it listed. So King Arthur's horse went along a certain path, and Sir Accolon followed after the king. And they went a great pass in this wise, and the night was descending upon them in the forest. But before it was entirely dark, they emerged out of that forest, and into an open place, where they beheld before them a very wide estuary, as it were an inlet of the sea. And before them were a beach of sand, very smooth and white. And they too went down to that beach, and stood upon the shore, and they wist not what to do, for there was no habitation in sight in any direction. Now, whilst they stood there a doubt, they suddenly perceived a ship at a very great distance away. And this ship approached where they were, sailing very rapidly. As the ship drew nigh to that place, they perceived that it was of a very strange and wonderful appearance, for it was painted in many divers colors, very gaudy and brilliant, and the sails were all cloth of silk, woven in divers colors, and embroidered with figures like to the figures of a tapestry. And King Arthur was very greatly amazed at the appearance of that ship. Now as they stood so watching the ship, they perceived that it drew nigher and nigher to that place where they were, and in a little it beached itself upon the shore of sand not very far away from them. Then King Arthur said to Sir Accolon, Sir, let us go forward to the shore, where we may look into this ship, for I never did see its like before in all my life, wherefore I have a thought that maybe it is fey. So they two went to where the ship was, and they stood upon the shore and looked down into it. And at first they thought that there was no one upon board of the ship, for it appeared to be altogether deserted. But as they stood there marveling at the wonderfulness of that ship, and at the manner in which it had come thither, they beheld, of a sudden, that certain curtains that hung before an apartment at the far extremity of the ship were parted asunder, and there came forth from that place 12 very beautiful damsels. Each of these was clad in a rich garment of scarlet satin, very bright and shining, and each wore around her head a circlet of gold, and each had many bracelets of gold upon her arms. These damsels came forward unto where the two knights were, and they said, Welcome, King Arthur. And they said, Welcome, Sir Accolon. At this, King Arthur was very much astonished that they should know him, and he said, Fair ladies, how is this? Ye should appear to know me very well, but I know ye not. Who are ye that know me and my companion, and call us by name? Unto this the chiefest of those damsels made reply, Sir, we are part fay, and we know all about you, and we know that ye have been following a very long chase, and we know that ye are aweary, a-hungered, and athirst. Wherefore we beseech ye that ye come aboard of this ship, and rest and refresh yourselves with food and drink. Now this appeared to King Arthur to be a very well bell adventure. Wherefore he said to Sir Accolon, Monsieur, I have a great mind for to go aboard this ship and to follow out this adventure. And Sir Accolon said, Lord, if thou goest, I will go also. So these ladies let fall a gangplank from the ship, and King Arthur and Sir Accolon drave their horses up the gangplank, and aboard the ship. And immediately they did so, the ship withdrew itself from the sands, and sailed away as it had come, very swiftly. And it was now the early night time, with the moon very round and full in the sky, like to a disk of pure shining silver. Then those 12 damsels aided King Arthur and Sir Accolon to dismount, and some took their horses away, and others led them into a fair chamber at the end of the ship. And in this chamber King Arthur beheld that a table had been placed, as though for their entertainment, spread with a linen cloth, and set with divers savoury meats, and with manchets of white bread, and with several different sorts of excellent wines. And at the sight King Arthur and Sir Accolon were very much rejoiced, for they were very greatly a-hungered. So they immediately sat themselves down at that table, and they ate and drank with great heartiness. And whiles they did so, some of those damsels served them with food, and others held them in pleasant discourse, and others made music upon lutes and citterns for their entertainment. So they feasted and made very merry. But after a while a very great drowsiness of sleep began to descend upon King Arthur, albeit he deemed that that drowsiness had come upon him because of the weariness of the chase. So presently he said, Fair damsels, ye have refreshed us a very great deal, and this hath been a very pleasant adventure. But I would now that ye had a place for us to sleep. Unto this the chiefest of the damsels replied, Lord, this boat hath been prepared for your refreshment, wherefore all things have been made ready for you with entire fullness. Therewith some of those 12 damsels conducted King Arthur into a sleeping chamber that had been prepared for him, and others led Sir Accolon into another chamber prepared for him. And King Arthur marvelled at the beauty of his chamber, for he thought that he had never beheld a more excellently bedight bedchamber than that one into which he now had entered. And King Arthur marvelled at the beauty of his chamber, for he thought that he had never beheld a more excellently bedight bedchamber than that one into which he had now entered. So King Arthur laid himself down with much comfort to his body, and straightway he fell into a deep and gentle sleep, without dream or disturbance of any sort. Now when King Arthur awoke from that sleep, he was astonished beyond all measure, that he wist not whether he was still asleep and dreaming, or whether he was awake. For lo, he lay upon a pallet in a very dark and dismal chamber, all of stone. And he perceived that this chamber was a dungeon, and all about him he heard the sound of many voices in woeful complaint. Then King Arthur said to himself, Where is that ship in which I was last night, and what hath become of those ladies with whom I spake? Upon this he looked about him, and behold, he saw that he was indeed in a dungeon, and that there was many knights in a very sad estate all around him. Wherefore he perceived that they were also captives, and that it was they who had made that sound of woeful lamentation which he had heard when awaking. Then King Arthur aroused himself from where he lay, and he saw that all those knights who were prisoners there were strangers unto him, and he knew them not. Then King Arthur aroused himself from where he lay, and he saw that all those knights who were prisoners there were strangers unto him, and he knew not them, and they knew not him. And of these knights there were 22 who were prisoners in that place. Then King Arthur said, Messieurs, who are you, and where am I at these present? To which the chiefest of those knights who were prisoners made reply, Sir, we are, like yourself, prisoners in a dungeon of this castle, and the castle belongs to a certain knight, hight Sir Damas, surnamed Lenoir. Then King Arthur made great marvel at what had befallen him, wherefore he said, Messieurs, here is a very singular thing hath happened to me. For last night I was asleep in a very wonderful ship that I believe was Fay, and with me was a knight companion, and lo, this morning I awoke alone in this dungeon, and know not how I came hither. Sir, said the knight who spake for the others, thou wert last night brought hither by two men clad in black, and thou wert laid down upon yonder pallet without awaking, wherefore it is very plain to me that thou art in the same case that we are in, and that thou art a prisoner unto this Sir Damas Lenoir. Then King Arthur said, Tell me, who is this Sir Damas? For I declare that I never before heard of him. I will tell you, said the captive knight, and therewith he did so, as follows. I believe, said he, that Sir Damas is the falsest knight that liveth, for he is full of treason and leasing, and is altogether a coward in his heart. Yet he is a man of very great estate, and very powerful in these parts. Now there are two brothers, and Sir Damas is one, and the other is hight Sir Ontzlake, and Sir Damas is the elder, and Sir Ontzlake is the younger. When the father of these two knights died, he left the one in equal patrimony with the other. But now it hath come about that Sir Damas hath nearly all of those estates, and that Sir Ontzlake hath only one castle, which same he now holdeth by the force of arms, and because of his own courage. For though Sir Damas is altogether a coward in his heart, yet he hath cunning and guile beyond any man of whom I ever heard tell. Wherefore it hath so come about, that of his father's patrimony Sir Damas hath everything, and Sir Ontzlake has nothing, saving only that one castle and the estate thereunto appertaining. Now it would appear to be very strange that Sir Damas is not satisfied with all this, yet he is not satisfied, but he covets that one castle and that small estate that is his brother's, so that he can hardly have any pleasure in life because of his covetousness. Yet he knoweth not how to obtain that estate from his brother, for Sir Ontzlake is a very excellent knight, and the only way that Sir Damas can lay hands upon that estate is by having to do with his brother, as man to man in a contest at arms, and this he is afraid to attempt. So for a long time Sir Damas has been in search of a knight who may take up his case for him, and do battle against Sir Ontzlake in his behalf. Wherefore all the knights whom he can arrest he bringeth to this castle, and giveth them their choice, either to take up his case against his brother, or else remain in this place as his prisoner without ransom. So he hath arrested all of us, and hath made demand of each that he should do battle in his behalf. But not one of us will take up the case of such an evil-conditioned knight as Sir Damas, so we all remain his prisoners. Well, quoth King Arthur, this is a very wonderful case. But methinks if Sir Damas maketh his appeal to me, I will take up his case, for I would rather do that than remain a prisoner here for all my life. But if I should take upon me this battle and be successful therein, then I will afterward have to do with Sir Damas himself in such a manner as I do not believe would be very much to his liking. Now a little while after this the door of that prison house was opened by the porter, and there entered a very fair young damsel. And this damsel came to King Arthur, and she said to him, What cheer? I cannot tell, quoth King Arthur, but meseems I am in a very sorry pass at this place. Sir, said the damsel, I am grieved to see so noble appearing a knight in so dolorous a cave. But if you will undertake to defend the cause of the lord of this castle with your person against his enemy, then you shall have leave to go whithersoever you please. To this King Arthur made reply, Lady, this is a very hard case, that either I must fight a battle I care not for, or else remain a prisoner here without ransom for all my days. But I would liever fight than live here all my life. And so I will undertake that adventure as thou wouldest have me do. But if I do battle for the lord of this castle, and if I should have grace of heaven to win that battle, then it must be that all these, my companions in imprisonment, shall also go forth with me into freedom. To this the damsel said, Very well, be it so, for that shall content the master of this castle. Then Sir Arthur looked more closely at the maiden, and he said, Damsel, meseems I should know thy face, for I think I have seen thee somewhere before this. Nay, sir, said she, that can hardly be, for I am the daughter of the lord of this castle. But in this she was false, for she was one of the damsels of Morgana le Fay, and she was one of those who had beguiled King Arthur into the ship the night before, and it was she who had brought him to that castle and had delivered him into the hands of Sir Domas. And all these things she had done upon command of Queen Morgana le Fay. Then King Arthur said, But if I do this battle, thou must carry a message for me unto the court of King Arthur, and that message must be delivered unto Queen Morgana le Fay into her own hands. Then, when that is done, I will do this battle for the cause of Sir Domas. And the damsel said, It shall be done so. So King Arthur wrote a sealed letter to Queen Morgana le Fay, that she should send to him his sword Excalibur, and he sent that message to her. And when Queen Morgana received that letter, she laughed and said, Very well, he shall have a sword that shall please his eye as well as Excalibur. And therewith she sent him that other sword that she had made exactly like Excalibur. So Sir Domas sent word unto his brother, Sir Ontzlake, that he had now a champion for to do battle in his behalf, to recover all that portion of their patrimony which Sir Ontzlake still withheld from him. Now when Sir Ontzlake received this message, he was thrown into great trouble of spirit, for a little while before he had been very sorely wounded in a tournament, in which a spear had been thrust through both of his thighs, so that he was then abed with that wound, and without power to arise therefrom. Wherefore he wist not what to do in this case, for he could not do battle upon his own behalf, and he had no one to do battle for him. Chapter 4th. What befell Sir Accolon, and how King Arthur fought and affair at arms with swords, and how he came nigh to losing his life thereby. Here followeth the account of what happened unto Sir Accolon the morning after he went aboard that magic ship with King Arthur, as aforetold. Now when Sir Accolon awoke from that same sleep, it was with him as it had been with King Arthur. For at first he wist not whether he was still asleep and dreaming, or whether he was awake. For lo, he found himself to be lying beside a marble basin of clear water that gushed up very high from a silver tube. He then perceived that not far from this fountain was a large pavilion of party-colored silk, which stood upon the borders of a fair meadow of grass. So Sir Accolon was altogether astonished to find himself in this place, when he had fallen asleep on board that ship, wherefore he was afraid that all this was the fruit of some very evil spell. So he crossed himself and said, God save King Arthur from any harm, for it seems to me that those damsels upon that ship have wrought some magic upon us for to separate us, the one from the other. So saying, he arose from where he lay, with intent to inquire further into that matter. Now as he made some noise in bestirring himself, there came forth from that pavilion aforementioned a very hideous dwarf, who saluted him with all civility and with high respect. Then Sir Accolon said to the dwarf, Sirrah, who are you? Unto which the dwarf made answer, Messire, I belong unto the lady of yonder pavilion, and she hath sent me to bid you welcome to this place, and to invite you in for to partake of a repast with her. Ha, quoth Sir Accolon, and how was it I came hither? Sir, said the dwarf, I do not know, but when we looked forth this morning we saw you lying here by the fountain side. Then Sir Accolon made great marvel at that which had happened to him, and by he said, Who is this lady? Who is thy lady? To which the dwarf replied, She is hight the Lady Goman of the Who is thy lady? To which the dwarf made reply, She is hight the Lady Goman of the fair hair, and she will be passingly glad of your company in her pavilion. Upon this Sir Accolon arose, and having laved himself at the fountain, and so refreshed himself, he went with the dwarf unto the pavilion of that lady, and when he had come there, he saw that in the centre of the pavilion was a table of silver, spread with a fair white cloth, and covered with very excellent food for a man to break his fast withal. Now immediately Sir Accolon came into the pavilion. The curtains upon the further side thereof were parted, and there entered from a further chamber a very beautiful lady, and gave Sir Accolon welcome to that place. And Sir Accolon said to her, Lady, methinks thou art very civil to invite me thus into thy pavilion. Nay, sir, said the lady, it took no great effort to be civil unto a knight so worthy as thou. Then she said to Sir Accolon, Sir, wilt thou sit here at the table with me, and break thy fast? At this Sir Accolon was very glad, for he was a-hungered, and the beauty of the lady pleased him a very great deal, wherefore it afforded him great joy for to be in her company. So they two sat at the table with a very cheerful and pleasant spirit, and the dwarf waited upon them. Now after Sir Accolon and the lady of the pavilion had broken their fasts, she spake to him in this wise. Sir Knight, thou appearest to be a very strong and worthy lord, and one very well used to feats of arms and to prowess in battle. To this Sir Accolon made reply, Lady, it does not beseem me to bespeak of my own worth, but this much I may freely say. I have engaged in several affrays at arms, in such measure as a knight with belt and spurs may do, and I believe that both my friends and mine enemies have had reason to say that I have at all times done my endeavours to the best of my powers. Then the damsel said, I believe you are a very brave and worthy knight, and being such, you might be of service to a good and worthy knight, who is in sad need of such service as one knight may render unto another. To this Sir Accolon said, What is that service? And the damsel replied, I will tell thee. There is, dwelling not far from this place, a certain knight hight Sir Ontzlake, who hath an elder brother hight Sir Domas. This Sir Domas hath served Sir Ontzlake very ill in many ways, and hath deprived him of well nigh of all his patrimony, so that only a little is left to Sir Ontzlake of all the great possessions that were one time his father's. But even such a small holding as that Sir Domas begrudges Sir Ontzlake, so that Sir Ontzlake must needs hold what he hath by such force of arms as he may himself maintain. Now Sir Domas hath found himself a champion who is a man of great deal of strength and prowess, and through this champion Sir Domas challenges Sir Ontzlake right to hold even that small part of those lands which were one time his father's. Wherefore if Sir Ontzlake would retain what is his, he must presently do battle therefor. Now this is a very sad case for Sir Ontzlake, for a short time since he was wounded by a spear at a tournament, and was pierced through both of his thighs, wherefore he is now not able to sit upon his horse and to defend his rights against assault. Wherefore meseems that a knight could have no better cause to show his prowess than in the defence of so sad a case as this. So spake that lady, and to all she said Sir Accolon listened with great attention, and when she had ended, he said, Lady, I would be indeed right willing to defend Sir Ontzlake's right, but lo, I have no armor, nor have I any arms to do battle withal. Then the damsel smiled very kindly upon Sir Accolon, and she said to him, Sir Ontzlake may easily fit thee with armor that shall be altogether to thy liking. And as for arms, I have in this pavilion a sword that hath but one other fellow in all the world. Upon this she arose, and went back into that curtained recess from which she had come, and thence she presently returned, bringing a certain thing wrapped in a scarlet cloth. And she opened the cloth before Sir Accolon's eyes, and lo, that which she had there was King Arthur's sword Excalibur in his sheath. Then the damsel said, This sword shall be thine if thou wilt assume this quarrel upon behalf of Sir Ontzlake. Now when Sir Accolon beheld that sword, he wist not what to think, and he said to himself, Certes, this is Excalibur, or else it is his twin brother. Therewith he drew the blade from out of its shield, and it shined with extraordinary splendor. Then Sir Accolon said, I know not what to think for pure wonder, for this sword is indeed the very image of another sword I wot of. When he so spake, that damsel smiled upon him again, and she said, I have heard tell that there is in the world another sword like to this. Then Sir Accolon said, Lady, to win this sword for myself, I would be willing to fight in any battle whatsoever. And so the damsel replied, Then, if thou wilt fight this battle for Sir Ontzlake, thou art free to keep that sword for thine own. At the which Sir Accolon was rejoiced beyond all measure of gladness. So it came about that, by the wiles of Queen Morgana le Fay, King Arthur was brought to fight a battle unknowingly with a knight very much beloved by him, and that knight had Excalibur to use against his master. For all these things had come to pass through the cunning of Morgana le Fay. Now a fair field was prepared for that battle in such a place as was convenient both to Sir Domas and to Sir Ontzlake, and thither they came upon the day assigned, each with his knight champion and his attendants. Sir Ontzlake being brought thither in a litter because of the sore wound in his thighs. Also a great many other folk came to behold the combat, for the news thereof had gone forth to a great distance round about that place. So all being in readiness, the two knights that were to do battle in that field were brought within the barriers of combat, each fully armed and each mounted upon a very good horse. Now King Arthur was clad all in armor of Sir Domas, and Sir Accolon was clad in armor that belonged to Sir Ontzlake, and the head of each was covered by his helmet, so that neither of those two knew the other. Then the herald came forth and announced that the battle was toward, and each knight immediately put himself in readiness for the assault. Thereupon, the word for assault being given, the two rushed forth, each from his station, with such speed and fury that it was wonderful to behold. And so they met in the midst of the course with a roar as of thunder, and the spear of each knight was burst all into small pieces under the truncheon, which he held in his hand. Upon this each knight voided his horse with great skill and address, and allowed it to run at will in that field. And each threw aside the truncheon of his spear, and drew his sword, and thereupon came, one against the other, with the utmost fury of battle. It was at this time that Vivien came to that place upon the behest of Merlin, and she brought with her such a court and state of beauty that a great many people took notice of her with great pleasure. So Vivien and her court took stand at the barriers, whence they might behold all that was toward. And Vivien regarded those two knights, and she could not tell which was King Arthur, and which was his enemy, wherefore she said, Well, I will do as Merlin desired me to do. But I must wait and see this battle for a while, ere I shall be able to tell which is King Arthur, for it would be a pity to cast my spells upon the wrong knight. So these two knights came together in battle afoot. And first they foined, and then they both struck at the same time, and lo, the sword of King Arthur did not bite into the armor of Sir Accolon, but the sword of Sir Accolon bit very deeply into the armor of King Arthur, and wounded him so sorely that blood ran down in great quantities into his armor. And after that they struck very often and very powerfully, and as it was at first, so it was afterward. For the sword of Sir Accolon ever bit into the armor of King Arthur, and the sword of King Arthur bit not at all into his enemy's armor, so that in a little while it came that King Arthur's armor was stained all over red with the blood that flowed out from a great many wounds, and Sir Accolon bled not at all because of the sheath of Excalibur which he wore at his side. And the blood of King Arthur flowed down upon the ground, so that all the grass around about was ensanguinated with it. So when King Arthur beheld how all the ground was wet with his own blood, and how his enemy bled not at all, he began to fear that he would die in that battle. Wherefore he said to himself, How is this? Hath the virtue departed out of Excalibur and his sheath? Were it not otherwise, I would think that this sword which cutteth me so sorely is Excalibur, and that this sword is not Excalibur. Upon this a very great despair of death came upon him, And he ran at Sir Accolon and smote him so sore a blow upon the helm that Sir Accolon nigh fell down upon the ground. But at that blow the sword of King Arthur broke short off at the cross of the handle, and fell into the grass among the blood, and the pommel thereof and the cross thereof was all that King Arthur held in his hand. Now at that blow Sir Accolon waxed very mad, so he ran at King Arthur, with intent to strike him some dolorous blow. But when he saw that King Arthur was without weapon, he paused in his assault, and he said, Sir knight, I see that thou art without weapon, and that thou hast lost a great deal of blood. Wherefore I demand thee to yield thyself unto me as recreant. Then King Arthur was again very much adread that his death was near to him. Yet because of his royalty it was not possible for him to yield to any knight. So he said, Nay, Sir knight, I may not yield myself unto thee, for I would liever die with honour than yield myself without honour. For though I lack a weapon, there are particular reasons why I might not lack worship. Wherefore thou mayest slay me as I am without weapon, and that will be thy shame, and not my shame. Well, said Sir Accolon, as for the shame, I will not spare thee unless thou dost yield to me. And King Arthur said, I will not yield me. Thereupon Sir Accolon said, Then stand thou away from me, so that I may strike thee. And when King Arthur had done as Sir Accolon bade him, Sir Accolon smote him such a woeful blow that the king fell down upon his knees. Then Sir Accolon raised Excalibur with intent to strike King Arthur again, and with that all the people who were there cried out upon him so to spare so worshipful a knight. But Sir Accolon would not spare him. Then Vivien said unto herself, Certes, that must be King Arthur who is so near to his death, and I do make myself vow that it would be a great pity for him to die after he hath fought so fiercely. So when Sir Accolon raised his sword the second time with intent to strike his enemy, Vivien smote her hands with great force, and emitted at the same time a spell of such potency that it appeared to Sir Accolon upon the instant as though he had received some very powerful blow upon his arm. For with that spell his arm was benumbed all from the fingertips unto the hollow of his armpit. And thereupon Excalibur fell out of Sir Accolon's hand, and into the grass. Then King Arthur beheld the sword, and perceived that it was Excalibur, and therewith he knew that he had been betrayed, wherefore he cried out thrice in a very loud voice, Treason! 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 And with that he set his knee upon the blade, and before Sir Accolon could stay him, he had seized it into his hands. Then it appeared to King Arthur that a great virtue had come into him because of that sword. Wherefore he arose from his knees and ran at Sir Accolon, and smote him so sorely that the blade penetrated his armor to the depth of half a palm's breadth. And he smote him again, and Sir Accolon cried out in a loud voice, and fell down upon his hands and knees. Then King Arthur ran to him, and catched the sheath of Excalibur, and plucked it away from Sir Accolon, and flung it away, and thereupon the wounds of Sir Accolon burst out bleeding, in great measure. Then King Arthur catched the helm of Sir Accolon, and rushed it off his head with intent to slay him. Now because King Arthur was blinded with his own blood, he did not know Sir Accolon. Wherefore he said, Sir knight, who art thou who hast betrayed me? And Sir Accolon said, I have not betrayed thee. I am Sir Accolon of Gaul, and I am a knight in good worship of King Arthur's court. But when King Arthur heard this, he made great outcry, and he said, How is this? Know you who I am? And Sir Accolon said, Nay, I know you not. Then King Arthur said, I am King Arthur, who am thy master. And upon this he took off his helmet, and Sir Accolon knew him. And when Sir Accolon beheld King Arthur, he swooned away, and lay like one dead upon the ground. And King Arthur said, Take him hence. Then when those who were there were aware who King Arthur was, they burst over the barriers and ran toward him with a great outcry of pity. And King Arthur would have left this place, but upon that he also swooned away, because of the great issue of blood that had come from him. Wherefore all those who were round about took great sorrow, thinking that he was dying. Wherefore they bewailed themselves without stint. Then came Vivien out into that field, and she said, "Let me have him, for I believe that I shall be able to cure his hurts." So she commanded that 2 litters should be brought, and she placed King Arthur in one of the litters, and she placed Sir Accolon in the other. And she bore them both away to a priory of nuns that was at no great distance from that place. And when Vivien had come there, she searched the wounds of King Arthur, and bathed them with a very precious balsam, so that they immediately began to heal. As for Sir Accolon, she would not have to do with his wounds, but let one of her attendants bathe him and dress his hurts. Now when the next morning had come, King Arthur was so much recovered that he was able to arise, though very weak and sick nigh unto death. So he got up from his couch, and he would not permit anyone to stay him. And he wrapped a cloak about him, and went to that place where Sir Accolon lay. When he had come there, he questioned Sir Accolon very narrowly, and Sir Accolon told him all that had happened to him after he had left that ship, and how the strange damsel had given him a sword for to fight with. So when King Arthur heard all that Sir Accolon had to tell him, he said, "Sir, I think that thou art not to be blamed in this matter, but I much do fear me that there is treachery here to compass my ruin." Then he went out from that place, and he found Vivien, and he said to her, "Damsel, I beseech thee to dress the wounds of that knight with the same balsam that thou didst use to dress my wounds." "Lord," said Vivien, "I cannot do so, for I have no more of that balsam." But what she said was false, for she did have more of that balsam, but she did not choose to use it upon Sir Accolon. So that afternoon Sir Accolon died of his wounds, which he had received in his battle with King Arthur. And that day King Arthur summoned Sir Domas and Sir Ornslick into his presence, and they came and stood before him, so filled with the terror of his majesty that they had not the power to stand, but fell down upon their knees unto him. Then King Arthur said, "I will pardon you, for ye knew not what ye did. But thou, Sir Domas, I believe art a very false and treasonable knight, wherefore I shall deprive thee of all thy possessions but that one single castle which thy brother had, and that I shall give unto thee, but all thy possessions I shall give unto Sir Ontzlake. And I shall further ordain that thou shalt never hereafter have the right to ride upon any horse but a palfrey, for thou art not worthy to ride upon a courser, as a true knight hath a right to do. And I command it of thee, that thou shalt presently liberate all those knights who were my companions in captivity, and thou shalt recompense them for all the injury that thou hast done to them, according as it shall be decided by a court of chivalry." Therewith he dismissed those 2 knights, and they were very glad that he had dealt so mercifully with them. Conclusion. Now, shortly after that combat betwixt King Arthur and Sir Accolon, the news thereof was brought to Queen Morgana le Fay, and the next day thereafter she heard that Sir Accolon was dead, and she wist not how it could be that her designs could have so miscarried. Then she was a doubt as to how much King Arthur might know of her treachery, so she said to herself, "I will go and see my brother, the king, and if he is aware of my treason, I will beseech him to pardon my transgression." So having made diligent inquiry as to where it was that King Arthur lay, she gathered together her court of knights and squires, and went thitherward. So she came to that place upon the 5th day after the battle, and when she had come there, she asked of those who were in attendance what cheer the king had. They answered her, "He is asleep, and he must not be disturbed." To which Queen Morgana le Fay replied, "No matter, I am not to be forbidden, for I must presently see him and speak with him." So they did not dare to stay her, because she was the king's sister. So Queen Morgana went into the chamber where the king lay, and he did not waken at her coming. Then Queen Morgana was filled full of hatred and a great desire for revenge. Wherefore she said to herself, "I will take Excalibur and his shield, and will carry them away with me to Avalon, and my brother shall never see them again." So she went very softly to where King Arthur lay, and she looked upon him as he slept, and perceived that he had Excalibur beside him, and that he held the handle of the sword in his hand while he slept. Then Queen Morgana said, "Alas for this! For if I try to take Excalibur away from him, haply he will awake, and he will slay me for my treason." Then she looked and perceived where the sheath of Excalibur lay at the foot of the couch. So she took the sheath of Excalibur very softly, and she wrapped it up in her mantle, and she went out thence, and King Arthur did not awaken at her going. So Queen Morgana came out from the king's chamber, and she said to those in attendance, "Do not wake the king, for he sleepeth very soundly." Therewith she mounted her horse, and went her way from that place. Now after a considerable while, King Arthur awoke, and he looked for the sheath of Excalibur, but he perceived that it was gone, wherefore he said immediately, "Who hath been here?" They in attendance made answer, "Queen Morgana le Fay had been here, and she came in and saw you, and went her way without waking you." Then King Arthur's heart misgave him, and he said, "I fear that she hath dealt treacherously with me from the beginning to the end of these adventures." Whereupon he arose and summoned all his knights and squires, and mounted his horse for pursuit of Queen Morgana, although he was still passing sick and faint from his sore wounds and loss of blood. Now as the king was about ready to depart, Vivien came to him where he was, and she said, "Lord, take me with thee, for if thou dost not do so, thou wilt never recover Excalibur his sheath, nor wilt thou ever overtake Queen Morgana le Fay." And King Arthur said, "Come with me, damsel, in God's name." So Vivien went with him in pursuit of Queen Morgana. Now by and by, as she fled, Queen Morgana le Fay looked behind her, and therewith she perceived that Vivien was with the party of King Arthur, wherefore her heart failed her, and she said, "I fear me that I am now altogether ruined, for I have aided that damsel to acquire such knowledge of magic that I shall have no spells to save myself from her counterspell. But at any rate it shall be that King Arthur shall never have the sheath of Excalibur again, for to help him in his hour of need." Now at that time they were passing beside the margin of a lake of considerable size. So Queen Morgana le Fay took the sheath of Excalibur in both her hands, and swung it by its belt above her head, and she threw it a great distance out into the water. Then lo, a very singular miracle occurred, for there suddenly appeared a woman's arm out of the water, and it was clad all in white, and it was adorned with many bracelets. And the hand of the arm catched the sheath of Excalibur, and drew it underneath the water, and no one ever beheld that sheath again. So the sheath of Excalibur was lost, and that was a grievous thing for King Arthur in aftertime, as you may sometime read. Now, after Queen Morgana le Fay had thus thrown the sheath of Excalibur into the lake, she went on a little farther, to where was a very lonely place, with a great many rocks and stones lying about upon the ground. And when she had come to that place, she exercised very potent spells of magic that Merlin had taught her. So by means of those spells, she transformed herself, and all of her court, and all of their horses, into large round stones of divers sizes. Then, in a little while, King Arthur came to that place, with his knights and squires, and he was exceedingly heavy of heart, for he had beheld from a great distance how Queen Morgana le Fay had thrown the sheath of Excalibur into that lake. Now when the king and his court had come to that spot, the damsel Vivien called out upon him to stop, and she said to him, "Lord, dost thou behold all those great round stones?" "Yea," said the king, "I do see them." Then Vivien said, "Lo, those stones are Queen Morgana le Fay and the court who were with her. For this magic that she hath done to change herself and them into stones was a certain thing that Merlin had taught her. Now I myself know that magic, and I also know how to remove that magic at my will. Wherefore, if thou wilt promise to immediately punish that wicked woman for all her treason by depriving her of her life, then I will bring her back into her true shape again, so that thou mayest have her in thy power." Then King Arthur looked upon Vivien with great displeasure, and he said, "Damsel, thou hast a cruel heart. Thou thyself hast suffered no injury at the hands of Queen Morgana. Wherefore then wouldest thou have me slay her? Now, but for all thou hast done for me, I would be very much affronted with thee. As for her, I forgive her all of this, and I shall forgive her again and again and yet again if she sin against me. For her mother was my mother, and the blood which flows in her veins and in my veins cometh from the same fountainhead. Wherefore I will do no evil thing against her. Let us return again whence we came. Then Vivien looked upon King Arthur very bitterly, and she laughed with great scorn, and said, Thou art both a fool and a dotard. And therewith she vanished from the sight of all. And after that, because King Arthur had rebuked her for her wickedness in the presence of others, she hated him even more than Morgana le Fay had hated him. Some time after that, King Arthur heard how Merlin had been beguiled by Vivien, and he sorrowed with great bitterness that Merlin was lost unto the world in that wise. So endeth the story of the passing of Merlin. And I believe we will stop there for today. Next time, we will pick up with the story of Sir Pelleas, the Gentle Knight. But until then, make sure to like and subscribe. You can also follow me on any of these social media platforms, including over on Patreon. Patrons get extra bonuses like their name in the credits, videos early, and more. This has been Classical Titerature. Thanks for watching.